The December wind carried dust and desperation through Sulphur Springs, Arizona territory, in the year 1886. 3 months had passed since Geronimo's surrender, and the town still wore its hatred like a badge of honor. Main Street lay empty except for the crowd gathered near the livery stable, their voices rising and falling like the caw of carrion birds circling prey. Inside a rusted iron cage, the kind once used to transport prisoners to territorial courts, sat a young Apache woman. Her name was Ayanna, though no one in the crowd cared to ask. 24 years of survival in a hostile land had carved her face into angles of defiance and dignity. Dark hair fell past her shoulders in tangles, matted with dust and the remnants of violence. The deerskin dress she wore, decorated with geometric patterns her grandmother had taught her to sew, hung torn at the shoulder. Blood crusted along her wrists where iron shackles bit into brown skin. But her eyes, those eyes held no surrender. They swept across the faces of her accusers with the same careful attention she gave to tracking deer through canyon country. She memorized them all. The shopkeeper with tobacco stains on his vest, the miner still wearing dust from the copper hills, the women clutching their shawls tight as if her mere presence might contaminate them. A man named Hendricks stood at the front of the mob. He owned the general store and half the buildings along Main Street. His face had gone red from shouting, spittle flying as he thrust one thick finger toward the cage. "That savage stole my best mare!" His voice cracked on the words. "A sorrel worth $200. String her up and be done with it." The crowd roared approval. Someone threw a rock that clanged against the iron bars. Ayanna did not flinch. Sheriff Lucas Brennan leaned against a hitching post 20 feet away, pretending to study the clouds gathering over the Dragoon Mountains. His badge caught the afternoon light, gleaming brighter than his conscience. At 45, he had perfected the art of selective blindness, of being present while remaining conveniently absent. From the crowd, a woman's voice rose, thin and uncertain. Clara Henderson, the banker's widow, stood on the boardwalk wringing her hands. "But Sheriff, there's no proof she actually took the horse. Perhaps if we just asked her to explain." Brennan's head snapped around. "Quiet, Clara. Law's the law. Horse theft's a hanging offense." The truth sat locked inside Ayanna's memory, vivid as yesterday's sun. She had found the mare 3 days ago in the hills above Dragoon Springs. A Mustang, wild-born, wearing no brand. The animal had been struggling in a ravine, leg caught between rocks. Ayanna spent 2 hours freeing her, singing the old songs her mother had taught, the ones that soothed frightened creatures. The mare followed her willingly after that, recognizing a kindred spirit. But when Hendricks saw the animal outside town, something shifted behind his eyes. He knew cavalry officers at Fort Huachuca would pay top dollar for a horse already broken, already gentled. All he needed was to claim ownership, and here stood a convenient thief, an Apache. Nobody would question it. Nobody ever did. Ayanna spoke only once, her English broken but clear. "I did not steal." The crowd erupted. How dare she speak? How dare she defend herself? Their righteous fury doubled, tripled, feeding on itself like wildfire in dry grass. A boy slipped through the press of bodies, barely 14, with sandy hair and eyes too old for his face. Tommy Reeves had been orphaned 2 years back when cholera swept through the mining camps. He survived by doing odd jobs, sleeping in barn lofts, staying invisible. But he had seen what really happened. He had watched from the ridge as Ayanna freed that mare, had seen the gentleness in her movements, the care she took. Tommy opened his mouth to speak, to tell them all they had it wrong. Sheriff Brennan's hand clamped down on his shoulder, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "Get out of here, boy. This ain't concern for children." Tommy stumbled backward, catching one last glimpse of Ayanna's face before the crowd swallowed his view. Her eyes met his for just a heartbeat. She knew. She knew he had seen, and she knew he could not help her. The sun slipped lower. Shadows stretched long across the dirt street. The crowd debated methods. Hanging seemed too merciful to some. Others suggested burning. A few proposed dragging her behind horses until nothing remained worth burying. They spoke of her death like men discussing crop prices, casual and certain. Then the sound came. Hoofbeats, single rider approaching from the west. The crowd's noise dimmed as curiosity turned their heads. A man on horseback emerged from the heat shimmer that danced above the desert floor. He sat tall in the saddle, back straight despite obvious exhaustion. His horse, a buckskin quarter horse with intelligent eyes, wore 3 days of hard travel in every dust-covered inch. Caleb Thornton had ridden from Fort Huachuca, 3 days of conducting business with the quartermaster there. Selling cattle to feed soldiers was honest work, and it kept his ranch afloat. The buckskin, Sterling by name, had earned his rest. So had Caleb. At 35, Caleb's face showed every year of a life lived outdoors and often alone. Brown hair touched with premature gray fell past his collar. A short beard framed a jaw set firm from years of swallowing grief. His eyes, blue as high country lakes, had seen too much death in the war and carried the weight of it still. The Colt 45 Peacemaker rode easy on his hip, positioned for a right-hand draw. Not for show, Caleb Thornton was not a man who advertised violence. But anyone who had served in the war between the states knew that quiet men were often the most dangerous. They had nothing left to prove. Caleb reined Sterling to a halt 50 yards out. His gaze swept the scene with the tactical assessment of a former soldier. Crowd, cage, woman, mob justice brewing. He had seen this before, in other towns, other territories. It always ended the same way. Blood in the dust and nobody willing to claim responsibility. He dismounted slowly, movements deliberate, tied Sterling's reins to the hitching post outside the saloon. The crowd parted without conscious thought as he walked forward, their collective memory recognizing something in his bearing that made even angry men step aside. Caleb stopped 10 feet from the cage. His eyes found Ayana's. In that moment, something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Not of faces, but of souls equally scarred by a world that showed little mercy. Her shoulders straightened. Pride flickered across her features. Here stood a man who actually looked at her, not through her, who saw a person, not a problem to be eliminated. Caleb's voice, when he spoke, carried the low rumble of distant thunder. "What's the charge?" Sheriff Brennan pushed off the hitching post, irritation creasing his forehead. "Horse theft. Apache squaw stole Hendrick's mare." Caleb turned his attention to the shopkeeper. "Your mare? Which one?" Hendrick shifted his weight, suddenly uncomfortable under that steady blue gaze. "The sorrel with the white blaze, worth $200, maybe more." A pause stretched out, long enough for the wind to rattle loose boards on the livery roof. Caleb's expression never changed, but something flickered in his eyes, memory surfacing. "Sorrel with a white blaze." He repeated the words slowly as if tasting them. "I saw that horse 3 days back, near Dragoon Springs, running wild, no brand." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Hendricks's face darkened. "You're mistaken, Thornton. I don't mistake horses." Caleb's tone held no anger, no accusation, just flat certainty. "That's a Mustang, wild-born. You can tell by the way she carries her head, the shape of her hooves. She's never known a barn until recently." The sheriff's hand dropped to his gun belt, not threatening, just reminding everyone of his authority. "This ain't your business, Caleb." "When did she supposedly take the animal?" Caleb asked, still focused on Hendricks. "Yesterday morning." "Can't steal a wild horse." Caleb's words fell like stones into still water. "No ownership means no theft." "She's Apache!" Someone from the crowd shouted it, as if that explained everything. Perhaps in this town, this year, it did. "They're all thieves." Caleb turned slowly, making eye contact with the man who had spoken. The man looked away first. When Caleb spoke again, his voice had dropped even lower, barely above a whisper, yet every person present heard it clearly. "I'm buying her." The words hit like a thunderclap. The crowd's roar died to shock silence. Even Ayana's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her stoic mask. Sheriff Brennan's mouth worked soundlessly for 3 seconds before words emerged. "What?" Caleb reached into his coat, pulled out a leather pouch heavy with coin. "She's not a horse thief, but if you need compensation." He counted out bills and silver dollars, his movements unhurried. "Here's 250, more than your mare's worth, Hendricks." Greed and confusion warred across the shopkeeper's face. He licked his lips, already calculating how that money could be spent. The sheriff found his voice. You can't just buy a prisoner. Indentured servitude. Caleb's words came clipped now, military precise. Legal under Arizona territory law. She works off her debt on my ranch. 7 years. Alternative to hanging. From the edge of the crowd, a new voice spoke. Doc Henry Wilson, 67 years old and the only man in Sulphur Springs whose education matched his compassion, stepped forward. His medical bag hung from one gnarled hand. He's right, Lucas. Indentured servitude's perfectly legal. Been used for debt payment since colonial times. You want to challenge territorial law, you'll need a judge. Nearest one's in Tucson, 80 miles away. Sheriff Brennan's jaw worked. He wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at him to assert his authority, to put this interference down hard. But Doc Wilson was right, damn him. And Caleb Thornton was not a man to cross lightly. Everyone in the territory knew the story, knew about his dead wife and child, knew about his war service, the commendations he never mentioned, knew he could drop a running coyote at 300 yards with that Winchester rifle he kept on his saddle. The sheriff forced a smile that looked more like a snarl. Fine, but she's your problem now, Thornton. When she murders you in your sleep, don't come crying to me. I won't. Caleb handed the money to Hendricks, who snatched it up like a man starving. Then Caleb turned to the sheriff. The cage. Brennan gestured irritably to a deputy who fumbled with keys at his belt. The lock clicked open. The iron door swung wide with a screech of protest. Caleb approached slowly, giving Ayanna time to understand, to choose. He pulled a small knife from his belt, the kind used for cutting rope and leather, and knelt beside the cage opening. I'm going to cut those shackles, he said quietly, directly to her. You're free to run if that's what you want. But if you stay, I'll give you food, shelter, and honest work. Your choice. Ayanna studied his face for a long moment. She had learned to read men the way others read books. This one carried pain in the set of his shoulders, loss in the lines around his eyes. But no cruelty, no hunger for power, just bone-deep weariness and something else, something that looked almost like understanding. She extended her wrists. Caleb worked the blade carefully between skin and metal, his touch surprisingly gentle for such large, calloused hands. The shackles fell away with a clatter. Ayanna rubbed her wrists, wincing as blood flow returned to compressed flesh. She stood slowly, legs numb from hours of confinement. The world tilted. Caleb's hand shot out, steadied her elbow until her balance returned. Then he released her immediately, respecting her space. Can you ride? He asked. She nodded. He led her to the Sterling, who snorted once but settled under Caleb's murmured reassurance. Caleb swung up into the saddle, then reached down. Ayanna hesitated only a heartbeat before accepting the offered hand. He pulled her up behind him with easy strength. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Caleb turned Sterling toward the edge of town. Ayanna sat rigid behind him, her hands gripping the cantle of the saddle, refusing to touch him more than necessary. Every muscle in her body screamed readiness to jump, to run, to fight if this turned into another trap. But Caleb simply guided Sterling into an easy walk. No hurry, no force, just steady progress away from the mom and their murderous intentions. As they passed the alley beside the general store, a small figure darted out. Tommy Reeves, breathing hard from running, fell into step beside the horse. Mr. Thornton, the boy's voice cracked with urgency. I wanted to help, but the sheriff, he wouldn't let me speak. And I saw what really happened. I saw her rescue that horse from the rocks, and easy, son. Caleb reined Sterling to a halt. He looked down at the boy with something approaching kindness. You did right staying out of it. Sometimes the best help is knowing when not to get yourself killed. Tommy's shoulders slumped. I should have been braver. You're alive. That's brave enough for today. Caleb glanced back toward town, where the crowd still lingered, disappointed of their entertainment. You heading home? Don't have a home, sir. Not proper, anyway. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Ayanna, pressed close enough to feel it, recognized the look. She had worn it herself when she found her brother's blanket in the ruins of their burned village. The look of someone seeing ghosts in the present. Climb on, Caleb said. Tommy's eyes went wide. Sir? Ranch can always use another hand. You know horses? Some, sir. I'm good with chickens, too. And I can read and write. My ma taught me before she... The boy's voice trailed off. Then climb on. Tommy scrambled up behind Ayanna, who shifted forward to make room. The boy flashed her a shy smile, gap-toothed and genuine. She blinked, confused by such easy acceptance from a white child. In her experience, white children learned hatred from their parents as naturally as breathing. Sterling snorted his opinion of carrying 3 riders, but accepted his burden with good grace. Caleb urged him forward, and they left Sulphur Springs behind. The sun hung low over the western hills, painting the desert in shades of amber and rust. The land rolled away in all directions, sparse and unforgiving, beautiful in its harsh honesty. Saguaro cacti stood like silent sentinels, their arms raised in permanent surrender to the sky. They rode in silence for the first hour. Ayanna's mind raced through possibilities, contingencies, escape routes. The man who called himself Caleb Thornton had saved her from immediate death, yes. But men always wanted something. Always. She had learned that lesson in Blood and Fire 4 years ago. Her hand drifted to the turquoise and coral necklace at her throat, the only thing left from her old life. Her grandmother had made it, teaching Ayanna the prayers that went into each bead. The necklace had survived the attack that killed her family, had survived 4 years of running. She touched it now for strength, for connection to something that had once been good and whole. Caleb felt the tension in the body behind him. He did not need words to understand. He had seen enough frightened creatures in his life, both animal and human, to recognize the signs, the rigid posture, the shallow breathing, the constant vigilance. He brought Sterling to a halt beside a dry wash where a few scrub bushes offered meager shade. Without a word, he dismounted and pulled his canteen from the saddlebag. He uncapped it, took a small sip, then held it up toward Ayanna. Water's clean, from my well. She stared at the canteen as if it might contain poison. Tommy, bless his young heart, piped up helpfully. Mr. Thornton's got the best water in 3 counties. Comes from deep underground. Tastes like nothing else. Ayanna's throat burned with thirst. She had not drunk since yesterday. Pride warred with survival. Survival won. She reached down and accepted the canteen. Their fingers brushed. She pulled back sharply, nearly dropping the container. Caleb stepped away, giving her space. He turned his attention to checking Sterling's hooves, pretending not to watch as she drank deeply. When she finished, she wiped her mouth and held the canteen out. He took it without comment and passed it to Tommy. They rode on. The landscape shifted gradually from desert scrub to high grassland. The Dragoon Mountains rose to the east, their peaks catching the last rays of dying light. A hawk circled overhead, calling its lonely song to the gathering dusk. Ayanna's thoughts drifted despite her efforts to stay alert. She thought of her mother who had taught her to weave and sing, of her father who had shown her how to track deer through snow without leaving prints, of her younger sister who had laughed like water over stones, and of Nahuel, her baby brother, only 8 years old when the Texas Rangers came. They had found a body afterward, small, burned beyond recognition. The soldiers said it was him. She had wanted to believe them because not knowing felt like leaving him behind. But the body had been too damaged. No way to be certain. And sometimes in the deep night, she still heard his voice, still saw his face, not dead, but alive somewhere, calling for her across impossible distance. False hope was cruelty, she told herself. She had searched the reservations when she dared. Mapoita and other Apache if they had seen a boy matching his description. No one had. He was gone. She had to accept that. She shook her head sharply, banishing the dangerous hope. The past was finished. Only survival mattered now. As true darkness fell, lights appeared in the distance. Not a town. Something smaller, more isolated. Thunder Mesa, Caleb said over his shoulder. My ranch. Another 20 minutes. Tommy perked up. You're gonna love it, miss. Mr. Thornton's got the finest barn in the territory, and the house has real glass windows. 4 of them. Despite everything, Ayanna felt a flicker of curiosity. She had not slept under a real roof in 4 years, had almost forgotten what it felt like to have walls between herself and the elements. They crested a low rise and Thunder Mesa spread before them. The house stood 2 stories tall, built from pine logs and local stone. Lamplight glowed warm in those glass windows Tommy had mentioned. A large barn painted red, though the color had weathered to rust in places, dominated the yard. Corrals stretched to the south where shadows moved. Cattle, maybe 80 head by her quick count. A windmill turned slowly in the evening breeze, its blades creaking rhythmically. It looked like civilization, like permanence. It terrified her more than the mob in Sulphur Springs. Caleb brought Sterling to a halt before the porch. He dismounted, then helped Ayanna down. She accepted his hand this time, if only because her legs had gone numb from the long ride. Tommy hopped down with the endless energy of youth and immediately ran toward the house. "I'll get a water heated," he called back, "and start supper. You like beans, miss? We got beans and bacon." Ayanna stood in the yard feeling exposed and vulnerable in this open space. Caleb busied himself with unsaddling Sterling, his movements practiced and efficient. "You'll sleep in the spare room," he said without looking at her. "Upstairs, east side. Door has a lock, from the inside." She went very still. "Why you tell me this?" "Because it's your space, your privacy. I don't enter without permission. You own me now. Indentured 7 years. Why you give me lock?" Caleb finally turned to face her fully. In the dim light from the house, his expression was difficult to read, but his voice carried absolute conviction. "I don't own you. Nobody owns anybody. You're working off a debt, that's all. And everyone deserves a door that locks. Everyone deserves to feel safe when they sleep." Ayanna shook her head slowly, trying to make sense of this strange man. "What you want from me?" "Work, help with the ranch, horses mostly. You're good with horses. I saw how that mare followed you." "That all?" Suspicion laced her words. "That's all. In return, you get food, shelter, safety. At the end of 7 years, you leave with $500 in saved wages. Enough to start over wherever you want." "Why you help me?" The question hung in the cooling air. Caleb looked away toward the mountains now visible only as darker shapes against the star-filled sky. When he spoke, his voice had gone rough, scraped raw by memory. "Because someone should have helped my family, and no one did." Before Ayanna could respond, the door to the house banged open. Tommy stood silhouetted in the doorway, waving them inside. "Supper's on! Well, it will be in about 10 minutes. Come on, before it gets cold. I mean, before it gets hot. You know what I mean." Caleb allowed himself the ghost of a smile. "Come on, you must be hungry." He was right, she was. Hunger had been her constant companion for so long, she barely noticed it anymore. But the smell wafting from the house, bacon and coffee and fresh bread, made her stomach clench with sudden desperate need. She followed him inside. The interior surprised her. She had expected rough bachelor quarters, all dirt and disorder. Instead, she found clean plank floors, swept and cared for, simple furniture, well made, books on a shelf, a stone fireplace where flames crackled cheerfully, real curtains on those glass windows. Tommy bustled around a cast-iron stove, talking nonstop as he worked. "So, I figure beans and bacon, and there's biscuits from this morning. They're a little hard, but if you dunk them in coffee, they soften right up. And oh, I found some dried apples in the root cellar. We could have those too if—" Caleb held up one hand. "Tommy, breathe." The boy stopped, grinned sheepishly. "Sorry, sir, I get excited." I noticed. But Caleb's tone held affection, not irritation. He gestured to a rough table with 4 mismatched chairs. "Sit, both of you." Ayanna lowered herself carefully into a chair, every muscle screaming protest. She had not sat on anything but dirt or stone in longer than she cared to remember. The chair felt alien, almost threatening in its comfort. Caleb disappeared up the stairs and returned a moment later with a thick blanket. He draped it over the back of her chair. "You're shaking, from cold or shock. Doesn't matter. This'll help." She pulled the blanket around her shoulders, astonished by its softness. Wool, real wool, not the rough trade blankets the Army distributed on reservations. This had been made with care, woven tight to keep out winter winds. Tommy served up the food with the enthusiasm of a puppy, beans steaming in wooden bowls, thick slices of bacon, biscuits that were indeed a bit hard but perfectly serviceable, coffee so dark it looked like midnight in a cup. Ayanna ate slowly at first, waiting for the trap to spring. waiting for the demand, the price, the moment when kindness revealed itself as manipulation. But Caleb simply ate his own meal in silence, occasionally correcting Tommy's table manners with a stern look. The food, simple as it was, tasted better than anything she could remember. Or perhaps she had simply forgotten what it felt like to eat without fear, without looking over her shoulder, without wondering if this meal would be her last. Tommy filled the silence with chatter. He told her about the chickens, who had names and personalities according to him, about the cattle, how they had to be moved to winter pasture soon, about the Mustangs Caleb had acquired last month, wild things that needed gentling before they could be sold. "That's where you come in," Tommy beamed at her. "Mr. Thornton said you have a gift with horses. He never says that about anyone. You must be really special." Ayanna glanced at Caleb, who had gone very still. He met her eyes briefly, then looked away, something like embarrassment coloring his weathered features. When the meal finished, Tommy leaped up to clear the dishes. "I'll handle cleanup. You should show her the room, Mr. Thornton. She looks dead on her feet." "No offense, miss." Caleb stood, gesturing toward the stairs. "This way." Ayanna followed him up the narrow staircase, her hand trailing along the smooth wood banister. At the top, a short hallway led to 3 doors. Caleb opened the one on the right. The room beyond was small but clean. A narrow bed with a real mattress. A simple dresser. That east-facing window, curtained now against the night. A kerosene lamp already lit, casting warm shadows. "There's water in the pitcher," Caleb said, pointing to the dresser. "Basin's next to it. Tommy will bring up heated water in the morning if you want to wash properly." He paused, seeming to struggle with words. "The lock works. I tested it last week when the door started sticking. Should be smooth now." He turned to leave, then stopped in the doorway. Without looking back, he spoke quietly. "I lost my wife and daughter 4 years ago. Diphtheria. I was away, hunting. By the time I got home, his shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. The doctor wouldn't come. Said we owed him money from before. Said he couldn't help without payment up front. They died while I begged." Ayanna's throat tightened. She understood the shape of that pain. The helplessness, the rage at a world that put profit above life. "That's why I couldn't leave you in that paramoise," Caleb continued. "Because I know what it's like when nobody helps, when everyone looks away." Finally he turned, met her eyes. "You don't owe me gratitude. You don't owe me anything but honest work. That's the deal. That's all it is." He left before she could respond, pulling the door closed behind him. Ayanna stood frozen in the center of the small room. Slowly, hardly daring to believe it, she crossed to the door. Her hand found the lock. She turned it. The bolt slid home with a solid click. She was alone. Truly alone. Safe behind a locked door in a room no one could enter without her permission. The tears came then, hot and unexpected. She sank onto the bed, burying her face in her hands, and wept. For her family, for 4 years of running, for the terror in that cage, for the unexpected mercy of a stranger who asked for nothing but work. She cried until exhaustion claimed her. The last thing she heard before sleep pulled her under was the distant sound of Caleb's voice downstairs, talking quietly with Tommy. The words were indistinct, but the tone carried through the floorboards. Patient, kind, safe. Downstairs, Caleb stood by the fireplace, staring into the flames. Tommy had gone to bed in his own small room off the kitchen. The house settled into nighttime silence. Doc Wilson's words from 6 months ago echoed in his memory. "You can't save everyone, Caleb. You can't bring them back by rescuing every stray that crosses your path." "I know that," Caleb had replied. "Do you?" "Because from where I stand, you're collecting lost souls like some men collect stamps." Maybe the old doctor was right. Maybe Caleb was trying to atone for failures that could never be undone. Margaret and little Emma would not come back no matter how many people he helped. But standing there in that crowd today, seeing Ayanna's eyes so fierce and proud, despite the cage, he could not walk away. Not again, not ever again. Caleb checked the doors, banked the fire, and climbed the stairs to his own room. Through the thin walls, he heard nothing from Ayanna's room. Good. She needed rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, teaching her the routine, integrating her into the work. dealing with whatever fallout came from today's confrontation in town. But those were tomorrow's problems. Tonight, for the first time in 4 years, Thunder Mesa Ranch housed more than one lost soul seeking redemption. As Caleb lay down on his narrow bed, he allowed himself one quiet prayer. Not to the God he had stopped believing in when his family died, but to something more abstract. Fate, luck, the universe itself. Let this work, he whispered to the darkness. Let her find some peace here. Let me do this one thing right. Outside, the wind carried the scent of coming winter across the high desert. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. And in a small room with a locked door, an Apache woman slept without fear for the first time in 1,600 days. The first night of their uncertain alliance passed in silence and unexpected grace. Neither of them knew it yet, but they had both just taken the first step on a path that would test everything they thought they knew about survival, trust, and the possibility of home. The story had begun. Dawn broke cold over Thunder Mesa, painting the eastern sky in shades of copper and gold. Ayanna woke to unfamiliar softness beneath her, momentarily disoriented by the absence of hard ground and open sky. Her hand flew to the knife she always kept close, fingers closing on empty air before memory returned. The cage, the stranger, the locked door. She sat up slowly, every muscle protesting. Through the east window, pale light revealed a landscape transformed by morning. The desert stretched away in all directions, painted in colors she had almost forgotten during 4 years of survival. Not just brown and gray, but purple sage and rust-colored earth, the deep green of juniper and the silver white of winter grass. From downstairs came the sound of movement, pots clanging, the smell of coffee, bacon sizzling in a pan. Her stomach clenched with hunger, but she remained still, listening, learning the rhythms of this new place before committing herself to its patterns. A soft knock at her door made her tense. Miss Ayanna, Tommy's voice bright with morning energy. Mr. Thornton says breakfast is ready. He made extra bacon on account of you probably being hungry. And there's eggs, real ones, not the dried kind. She crossed to the door, hesitated with her hand on the lock. Trust had to start somewhere. She turned the bolt. Tommy stood in the hallway grinning, his sandy hair sticking up in all directions. Morning, did you sleep good? I bet you did. That bed's way better than barn lofts. I know because I slept in barn lofts for near about a year before Mr. Thornton took me in. The boy's enthusiasm was overwhelming, but something about it felt genuine. Not the false cheerfulness of someone seeking favor, but the simple joy of a child who had found safety and wanted to share it. Come on, Tommy urged. Food gets cold fast in December. She followed him downstairs. Caleb stood at the stove, his back to them, moving with the efficient economy of a man long accustomed to cooking for himself. He had already been outside, his boots carried fresh mud and his hair was damp, slickened back from washing at the pump. He glanced over his shoulder as they entered. Morning, you sleep? Ayanna nodded, not quite ready for words. Good. He gestured to the table where 3 plates waited, already loaded with food. Scrambled eggs, thick slices of bacon, biscuits with butter and honey. More food than she had seen in a single meal for longer than she cared to remember. They ate in relative silence, broken only by Tommy's occasional commentary on the chickens' personalities or the weather forecast based on how the cows were standing. Ayanna ate slowly, watching Caleb from beneath lowered lashes. He moved with deliberate care, she noticed. His left leg showed a slight stiffness when he walked, favoring it almost imperceptibly. An old injury, long healed, but never quite forgotten. When the plates were clean, Caleb pushed back from the table. Tommy handles the garden and chickens. I manage cattle and horses. You will help me with the horses. He paused, studying her face. You know horses? For the first time since arriving, Ayanna spoke more than a single word. Apache born on horses. We learned to ride before we walk. Good. Something that might have been approval flickered across his weathered features. We have 3 wild Mustangs that need breaking. Most folks use force, ropes and whips and fear. I prefer patience. You? Ayanna's eyes lit with the first real emotion he had seen from her. Apache way is become friend first. Horse must choose you. then we will work well together. An hour later, they stood at the corral fence, steam rising from coffee cups in the cold morning air. Inside the enclosure, three Mustangs moved with nervous energy. A black stallion, magnificent and wild-eyed, a bay mare with a white star on her forehead, a pinto with markings like scattered paint. "The stallion's the challenge," Caleb said. "I have been working with him for 3 days. He tolerates me. Barely." Ayanna set down her cup and climbed the fence rail with fluid grace. Before Caleb could speak, before he could warn her or question her methods, she dropped into the corral. The Mustangs scattered to the far side, snorting alarm, all except the black stallion. He stood his ground, ears pinned back, muscles bunched for fight or flight. Ayanna did not approach him directly. Instead, she moved to the center of the corral and sat down in the dirt, cross-legged, perfectly still. She began to sing. The song rose soft and rhythmic, words in a language Caleb did not understand but recognized as Apache. The melody carried the cadence of running water, of wind through canyon walls, of all the wild and beautiful things that existed before men tried to tame them. Tommy climbed up beside Caleb, whispering, "What's she doing?" "Teaching us," Caleb murmured back. "Watch." The black stallion's ears swiveled forward, his head lowered a fraction. Minutes passed. 5, 10. The song continued, never faltering, weaving a spell of sound and patience. Slowly, impossibly, the stallion took a step toward her, then another. The bay mare followed his lead, curiosity overcoming fear. By the time 30 minutes had passed, all three horses stood within 10 feet of Ayanna. The black stallion stretched his neck, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. She remained motionless, eyes half closed, still singing that ancient song. The stallion's muzzle touched her shoulder, gentle as falling snow. Caleb felt something shift in his chest. He had gentled horses all his life, considered himself skilled at the work. But this, what he was witnessing now, this transcended skill. This was art. This was understanding at a level that had nothing to do with technique and everything to do with connection. Ayanna's hand rose, slow as sunrise, and touched the stallion's jaw. He did not flinch. She stroked the dark coat, fingers finding the places that itched, that hurt, that needed attention. The horse's eyes half closed in pleasure. "Sweet mercy," Tommy breathed. "It took you 3 days just to get close enough to touch him, Mr. Thornton." "I know." Caleb's voice held equal parts admiration and something else, respect. Recognition that he stood in the presence of someone whose gifts exceeded his own. Ayanna stayed in the corral for another hour, working with all three horses, letting them become accustomed to her voice, her smell, her presence. By the time she climbed back out, the black stallion had accepted a rope halter and allowed her to drape a blanket across his back. She stood beside Caleb at the fence, slightly out of breath, her eyes bright with an emotion he could not quite name. Joy, perhaps, or purpose. The look of someone doing the thing they were born to do. "You have a gift," he said quietly. She looked at him, surprised. "It's just how my father teach me, how his father teach him." "Then your father was a wise man." A shadow crossed her face, quick as a hawk's passing. "He was, before they kill him." Caleb wanted to ask who, when, how, but the wall had come back up in her eyes, and he knew better than to push. Pain revealed itself in its own time, or not at all. He understood that truth intimately. They worked together through the morning, Ayanna with the horses, Caleb repairing fence posts nearby, close enough to help if needed, but far enough to give her space. Tommy flitted between them like a hummingbird, carrying water, fetching tools, maintaining a constant stream of cheerful commentary. By noon, the black stallion wore a saddle. By mid-afternoon, Caleb sat astride him while Ayanna held the lead rope, her calm presence keeping the animal steady. The stallion danced and snorted, but did not buck, did not fight, accepting the weight on his back as part of this new reality. When Caleb dismounted, his leg gave slightly. He caught himself on the fence rail, jaw tight against whatever pain the movement caused. Ayanna noticed. She saw everything he was learning. Those dark eyes missed nothing. "Old wound?" she asked. "Shiloh, 1862, mini-A ball through the thigh. Doctor said I would never walk right again." He was mostly correct. But you ride? Riding's different, easier on the leg than walking sometimes. She nodded, filing away this information. Vulnerability recognized but not exploited. Another piece of this strange man's puzzle. That night, they ate stew Tommy had spent the afternoon preparing. The boy had a knack for cooking, making even simple ingredients taste special. As they cleaned up afterward, Tommy chattered about his plans for the garden come spring. I was thinking we could plant more beans, and maybe some squash. Do you like squash, Miss Ayana? I can make it real good with butter and a sound cut through his words. Hoofbeats, single rider, approaching fast. Caleb was on his feet before the echo faded, his hand dropping instinctively to where his gun would be if he wore it inside. He did not. The peacemaker hung on a peg by the door, close but not on his hip. He had stopped wearing it in the house years ago after Emma had reached for it with curious toddler hands. Tommy, take Ayana upstairs. But Mr. Thornton, now! Something in Caleb's tone killed all argument. Tommy grabbed Ayana's hand and pulled her toward the stairs. She went, but her eyes stayed locked on the door, on Caleb's tense shoulders, reading the danger in his sudden stillness. Caleb took down the peacemaker and checked the cylinder. 6 rounds. He hoped he would not need even one. He stepped onto the porch as the rider came into view. Deputy Jack Mercer, young, nervous, his hand trembling slightly as he reined his horse to a halt. Not a man comfortable with whatever duty brought him here. Mr. Thornton, Jack's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat, tried again. I have papers for you. What kind of papers? Court summons. Jack pulled an envelope from his saddlebag. And an arrest warrant. The words fell like stones into still water. Caleb's expression never changed, but something went very quiet behind his eyes. The stillness of a man who had faced cannon fire and lived. For what crime? Summons is about land ownership. Someone named Elijah Moss claims he owned Thunder Mesa before you. Says your deed is invalid. Jack swallowed hard. The warrant, that is for illegal detention of an Apache woman. Law says all Apache got to be on reservation. Your indentured contract, it was not registered proper with the territorial office. From the upstairs window, Ayana heard every word. Her hands clenched the curtain, knuckles white. This was her fault. She had brought this trouble to the man who saved her. The old familiar guilt rose like bile in her throat. Caleb's voice, when he spoke, remained perfectly calm. When is the hearing? 3 days, December 18th. And bail for the arrest? Jack looked miserable. $500. A fortune, more than Caleb had after spending $250 to buy Ayana's freedom. He had maybe $240 left from the cattle sale. Not nearly enough. Before Caleb could respond, the front door banged open. Tommy ran out, clutching a small wooden box to his chest like it contained his heart. I have it. Well, some of it. The boy's face was flushed, eyes bright with tears he refused to shed. He thrust the wooden box forward. My pa's savings, before the mine accident. He told me where he hid it, in case something happened. $160. It ain't enough, but with what you got. Caleb's chest ached. The boy was offering the last piece of his father. Tommy, no. His voice went rough. That's all you have left of him. You're what I got of a father now, sir. Tommy's voice cracked. You gave me a home when nobody else would. You taught me to read better. You showed me how to shoe a horse. You made me feel like I mattered. Family takes care of family. The deputy looked away, uncomfortable with the raw emotion. Caleb stared at the box, seconds stretching like hours. Then very gently he took it. I will pay you back, every cent, with interest. Don't want interest, just want you to stay free. They counted out the money, $240 from Caleb's remaining funds, $160 from Tommy, $400 total. Caleb's stomach dropped. We are still short $100. Doc Wilson, who had been standing quietly in the doorway, stepped forward. He pulled a worn leather wallet from his coat pocket. I have the rest. He counted out bills. $100. Consider it an investment in justice. Jack took the money, all $500, and handed over the receipt. Jack took the money with obvious reluctance, handing over a receipt in return. Hearing is in 3 days. Do not leave the county, Mr. Thornton. I will be there. The deputy rode away, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Caleb stood on the porch, the receipt crumpling slowly in his clenched fist. Behind him, Ayanna appeared in the doorway. "This is because of me." He turned to face her. "No, this is because of greed. They want my land. The railroad wants to run track through here. You are just an excuse. I can leave, go to reservation, make the problem disappear." "Is that what you want?" She met his eyes. Several heartbeats passed in silence. Then quietly, "No, neither do I." He looked past her to where Tommy stood in the doorway, trying to be brave. "We are going to fight this, all of us together." "How?" Ayanna asked. "They have law on their side." "Maybe, but law can be challenged. Truth can be proven." He walked past her into the house, moving toward the shelf where he kept his important papers. "First thing tomorrow, we ride to town. Talk to Doc Wilson. He knows the law better than anyone around here. If there is a way to prove that this Elijah Moss never existed, Doc will find it." That night, sleep came hard to all three of them. Ayanna lay in her locked room, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through options. She could run, disappear into the desert. Her people had hidden from the army for years in terrain far harsher than this. But the thought of leaving, of abandoning Calab to face consequences meant for her, sat wrong in her chest. Downstairs, Caleb pored over his deed by lamplight, memorizing every word, every signature, looking for weaknesses, for proof, for anything that might help. The paper was legitimate. He knew it was. The sale had been honest, the price fair. But honest did not always matter when powerful men wanted what you had. In his small room off the kitchen, Tommy lay awake, his empty savings box open beside him. He did not regret giving the money. Not for a second. Mr. Thornton was the closest thing to a father he had known since his own pa died in a mining accident. Some things were worth more than money. Some things you fought for. The next morning broke gray and cold, heavy clouds pressing down like a lid on a pot. Caleb saddled Sterling and a gentle mare for Ayanna. They left Tommy to mind the ranch, despite his protests. The ride to Sulphur Springs took 2 hours. They did not speak much. Words felt inadequate against the weight of what they faced. Doc Wilson's office sat above the general store, accessed by an outside staircase. The old man answered their knock, unsurprised to see them. "Figured you would come." He gestured them inside. "Coffee?" "Answers," Caleb said. Doc poured coffee anyway, strong enough to strip paint. He settled into his chair with a sigh that spoke of joints gone stiff with age. "Let me see your deed." Caleb spread the document on Doc's cluttered desk. The old man produced spectacles, perching them on his nose as he studied the paper with professional attention. "Looks legitimate to me. Signed by the Territorial Land Office in Tucson, dated June 15th, 1878. Properly witnessed." He looked up. "But they are claiming someone named Elijah Moss owned it first?" "That is what the summons says." "Never heard of him." Doc stood, moved to a shelf crammed with ledgers and record books. "I keep copies of land transactions going back 20 years. Habit from when I served as deputy clerk." He pulled down a heavy volume, flipped through pages. "Here, 1876, every land sale recorded in this county that year." His finger traced down columns of names. "No Elijah Moss." "Forgery," Caleb said flatly. "Obviously, but proving it?" Doc removed his spectacles, rubbed his eyes. "That is the trick. You need the original land office records from Tucson. Need a handwriting expert to compare signatures. Need time to build a proper defense." "We have 3 days." "I know." Doc looked genuinely pained. "Caleb, I will testify. So will Clara Henderson. She saw what really happened with the horse. But without hard evidence that the Moss deed is fake, we are going to lose." The words hung in the air like smoke. Ayanna had been standing quietly near the window, listening. Now she spoke. "Then we no fight in court. We fight different way." Both men turned to look at her. "Among my people," she continued, "when enemy attacks, we do not just defend. We strike back, find weakness, exploit it." "What weakness?" Caleb asked. "Sheriff is greedy. This railroad man is greedy. Greedy men make mistakes when they think they are winning." Doc leaned forward, interested. "What are you suggesting?" "I can go into town, watch, listen. I am very good at not being seen." "Too dangerous," Caleb said immediately. "If they catch you..." They will not catch me. Her voice carried absolute certainty. I have been hunted by cavalry for 4 years. I know how to be invisible. Doc looked between them, then he spoke carefully. She is right about one thing. If the sheriff and this Virgil Stone are conspiring to steal your land, they will talk about it, plan it, might even be foolish enough to discuss it where someone could overhear. I do not like it, Caleb said. Do you have a better plan? Ayanna challenged. He did not. They all knew it. The plan took shape over the next hour. Ayanna would infiltrate Sulphur Springs that night, after dark. She would find a position where she could watch the sheriff's office without being seen, listen for any conversation between Sheriff Brennan and Virgil Stone, anything that might prove conspiracy, that might show corruption. It was desperate. It was dangerous. It was all they had. They rode back to Thunder Mesa in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the ranch, Tommy came running from the barn, waving his arms. Ryder's been here, 2 men. They were looking around, measuring things. Caleb dismounted quickly despite his bad leg. Did they say what they wanted? No, sir, but they had surveying equipment. I seen them stakes before. Railroad uses them. Ayanna walked to where Tommy pointed. Sure enough, wooden stakes had been driven into the ground, each one stamped with initials. V.S. Railroad Company. 3 miles from the house, in a straight line that would cut right through the best grazing land. They are already planning the route, she said quietly. They are so sure they will win, they have started the work. Caleb's jaw set hard. Then we make sure they are wrong. That night, after a tense supper none of them really tasted, Ayanna prepared to leave. She changed into her darkest deerskin dress, braided her hair tight against her skull. No jewelry, nothing that might catch light or make noise. Caleb watched her preparations with growing unease. I should come with you. No, you are too big, too white. You would be noticed. She checked the small knife at her belt. I have been doing this since I was young. I will be fine. Tommy hugged her quickly, fiercely. Be careful. Please. I will. At the door, Caleb caught her arm gently. If anything goes wrong, you run, you understand. You do not try to be brave. You run. She looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding, trust. The fragile beginning of something neither could name yet. I will come back, she said. You better. She disappeared into the darkness like smoke dissolving. One moment there, the next simply gone. Caleb stood on the porch long after she vanished, staring into the night, fighting the urge to saddle Sterling and follow. Tommy appeared beside him. She'll be okay. She's smart. Smart people die too, Caleb said. I have seen it happen. They went inside. Neither slept. They sat at the kitchen table, playing cards without seeing them, listening to the clock tick, waiting. Ayanna moved through the desert like wind through grass, silent, unseen. She reached Sulphur Springs just after midnight. The town slept, windows dark, streets empty. Only the saloon showed light, and the sheriff's office. She climbed to the roof of the building adjacent to the sheriff's office, a defunct grain warehouse. The flat roof gave her a perfect vantage point. She settled near the ventilation gap, a space where 2 boards did not quite meet, and listened. Voices drifted up. 3 men. She recognized Sheriff Brennan's whiny drawl immediately. The second voice was smoother, educated, dangerous. Virgil Stone. The third voice she did not know. Cold, flat, a man for whom killing was business, nothing more. The hearing is in 2 days, Virgil was saying. Judge Carver will rule in our favor. I made sure of that. You paid him off? Brennan's voice held equal parts greed and nervousness. Generously, the Moss deed will be declared legitimate. Thornton's claim will be voided. And if he appeals, the third voice spoke for the first time, he will not be alive to appeal. Ayanna's blood went cold. Now wait, Brennan protested weakly. I did not agree to murder. You took my money, Lucas. Virgil's voice hardened. $5,000. You are in this as deep as I am. Hunt here will handle the details. After the hearing. Make it look like an accident. A fall from a horse, perhaps. The man called Hunt spoke again. My fee is another $2,000. Done. Just make sure it cannot be traced back to us. Ayana had heard enough. She started to back away from the edge of the roof, moving slowly, carefully. Her foot found a loose board. It creaked, loud as a gunshot in the night silence. What was that? Inside, Brennan's voice spiked with alarm. On the roof. Hunt was already moving. Ayana ran. She leaped from the warehouse roof to the adjacent building, her feet barely touching the edge before launching again. Behind her, she heard the door crash open, boots pounding up the outside stairs. A gunshot cracked the night. The bullet missed her by inches, splintering wood beside her head. She did not slow. Another roof, another leap. Her lungs burned. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She hit the ground running, heading for the alleys she had scouted earlier. Behind her, hoofbeats. They had horses now. Hunt was mounted, cutting off her escape routes with the skill of a professional tracker. She dodged into the livery stable, scrambling up into the hayloft. Below, Hunt's horse stopped. She heard him dismount, heard the soft whisper of a rifle being drawn from its scabbard. He entered the stable, footsteps slow, deliberate. He knew she was here, knew she was trapped. Ayana pressed herself into the shadows of the hay, controlling her breathing, making herself small. Hunt's shadow fell across the floor below, massive and dark. His hand shot up, grabbed her ankle. She kicked, her moccasin connecting solidly with his jaw. He grunted, loosened his grip just enough. She twisted free, scrambled toward the loft window. Another gunshot, this one closer. The bullet grazed her left shoulder, white-hot agony that almost made her fall. Almost. She went through the window, dropped 10 feet to the ground outside, rolled to absorb the impact. Her shoulder screamed protest, but she ignored it. Her horse was tied outside town. If she could just reach it. She ran through darkness, blood soaking her dress, pain lancing through her with every movement. Behind her, Hunt emerged from the stable, raising his rifle for another shot. The bullet hissed past her ear. Then she was beyond the town limits, into the scrub, invisible in the dark. She found her horse, pulled herself into the saddle with her good arm, and kicked the animal into a gallop. Hunt fired twice more, but she was already out of range, swallowed by the night. She rode hard for Thunder Mesa, swaying in the saddle, consciousness flickering. Had to warn Caleb, had to tell him what she heard, had to. Dawn was breaking when Thunder Mesa came into view. Ayana slumped forward, barely holding on. The horse, sensing home, picked up its pace. Caleb was already in the yard, pacing, sick with worry. He had not slept, had not even tried. When he heard the hoofbeats, he spun around. His face went white as Ayana slid from the saddle, collapsing into his arms. Jesus. His hands found the wound, blood hot and slick. Tommy, get Doc Wilson. Ride like the devil himself is chasing you. Tommy was already running for the barn. Caleb carried Ayana inside, laid her on the kitchen table. He tore clean cloth into strips, pressing them against the wound. She gasped, eyes flying open. They planned to kill you, she managed. After court. Man named Hunt. Make it look like accident. Hush. Save your strength. No, you must know. She grabbed his shirt with her good hand, pulling him close. Sheriff took $5,000. Judges bought. They will rule against you no matter what. Caleb's face hardened into something that looked carved from stone. Then we changed the game. How? I do not know yet, but I will figure it out. He pressed another cloth to her wound. You stay alive. You hear me? You stay alive because I am not done learning from you yet. Her eyes started to close. Caleb? What? Thank you for giving me reason to fight. Then she was unconscious, her body going limp. Caleb held pressure on the wound, willing her to keep breathing, to keep fighting, to survive this mess he had dragged her into. When Tommy returned 2 hours later with Doc Wilson, the old man took one look at the wound and got to work. He dug out the bullet, clean through the shoulder muscle, missing bone by a miracle. He stitched her up with practiced efficiency while Caleb held her still, and Tommy looked away, unable to watch. She will live, Doc pronounced finally. She is strong, lost blood, but not too much. Give her a few days, she will be back to fighting form. Caleb sagged against the wall, the tension draining out of him all at once. Doc washed his hands, studying Caleb with knowing eyes. You have feelings for her. I have responsibility for her. That too, but also feelings. Caleb did not deny it, could not, truthfully. Something had shifted in him these past days. The loneliness that had wrapped around his heart since Margaret and Emia died, it had begun to crack. Not healed, not gone, but cracked enough to let light through. Does not matter, he said finally, if I am dead after the hearing. Then we make sure you are not dead. Doc gathered his instruments. I will talk to Clara Henderson, see if she will testify, and I will send a telegram to Tucson, to the land office. Maybe we can get something, anything to help. 3 days is not enough time. Then we make it enough. After Doc left, Caleb carried Ayanna upstairs to her room, laying her gently on the bed. He pulled the blanket over her, his hand lingering a moment on her forehead. No fever yet. That was good. Tommy appeared in the doorway. What do we do now? We prepare for war, Caleb said quietly, because that is what this has become. He stood there a moment longer, watching Ayanna breathe, then turned and headed downstairs. There was planning to do, defenses to prepare. He had survived Shiloh and Atlanta, had lived through watching his family die. He would be damned if he let corrupt men with false deeds take everything he had left. The storm was coming, but Caleb Thornton had weathered storms before, and this time, he was not alone. 2 days had passed since the infiltration. 2 days of healing, planning, and the impossible reunion with Nahuel. Now on the morning of December 18th, the day of reckoning had arrived. The pain woke her before dawn, a burning line of fire across her shoulder that pulled Ayanna from dreams of running through canyons she would never see again. She opened her eyes to the familiar ceiling of her room at Thunder Mesa, memory flooding back in pieces. The rooftop, Hunt's cold voice, the bullet, Caleb's hands, gentle and sure, holding her together. She sat up slowly, testing her limits. The shoulder protested but held. Doc Wilson's stitching was tight and clean, the wound dressed with herbs that smelled of sage and something sharper. Apache medicine mixed with white man's skill. The old doctor knew more than most about the healing ways of different peoples. Dawn light crept through the window, painting everything in shades of gray and gold. From downstairs came the sound of voices. Low, urgent, planning. Ayanna stood, swaying slightly as blood rushed to her head. She steadied herself against the dresser, breathing through the wave of dizziness. Her dress hung on a peg, cleaned of blood, mended where the bullet had torn through. Someone had done that. Tommy, probably. The boy had gentle hands. She dressed carefully, each movement deliberate to avoid jarring the wound. When she was ready, she unlocked her door and descended the stairs. The kitchen table was covered with papers, maps, deeds, legal documents spread like weapons across worn wood. Caleb stood bent over them, his finger tracing property lines. Doc Wilson sat to his left, spectacles perched on his nose, reading from a thick ledger. Tommy moved between the stove and table, keeping coffee cups full. All three looked up as she appeared in the doorway. You should be resting, Caleb said, but there was relief in his voice at seeing her upright. I rest when this is finished. She moved to the table, studying the maps with interest. What have you found? Doc pushed his ledger toward her. Records going back to 1870, no Elijah Moss anywhere. Not in land sales, not in mining claims, not in marriage or death certificates. The man never existed. So we can prove the deed is false. In theory, yes. In practice? Doc shook his head. We need the original filed documents from Tucson. That is 80 miles away. The hearing is tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word hung heavy in the morning air. There is more, Caleb said quietly. He pulled out a journal, old and leather-bound, pages yellowed with age. This belonged to Samuel Garrett, the man I bought Thunder Mesa from. Tommy found it yesterday while searching the attic for anything that might help. Tommy beamed with pride despite the circumstances. It was in a trunk under old blankets. Caleb opened the journal to a marked page. Listen to this. June 10th, 1878. Sold Thunder Mesa to Caleb Thornton today. $3,000, fair price for good land. He is a fair man, honest in his dealings. I trust he will care for this place better than I did. He looked up. Samuel's signature is at the bottom. It matches the one on my deed exactly. That proves you bought it legitimately, Ayanna said. It proves I bought it from Samuel. But they will argue Samuel did not own it in the first place, that Moss owned it first. Caleb's jaw tightened. We are going in circles. A knock at the door broke the tension. All four of them went still. Caleb's hand dropped to where his gun would be, but he had left it upstairs, not wanting to wear it around Ayanna while she recovered. Tommy moved to the window, peered out. It is Deputy Mercer, alone. Caleb opened the door cautiously. Jack Mercer stood on the porch, his badge catching morning light, his face troubled. "Mr. Thornton, can I come in?" "Depends. You here to arrest someone else?" "No, sir. I am here because—" Jack glanced past Caleb, saw the others watching. "Because my conscience will not let me stay quiet anymore." Caleb stepped aside. Jack entered, removing his hat, twisting it in his hands. "I heard things," the young deputy said without preamble. "Night before last, I was doing rounds, passed by the sheriff's office. Window was open. I heard the sheriff talking with Virgil Stone and a man I did not recognize." Ayanna leaned forward. "Hunt McKenna." Jack's eyes widened. "You know him?" "I met him, briefly." She touched her wounded shoulder. Understanding dawned on Jack's face, followed by anger. "He shot you." "He tried. I am still here." Jack turned to Caleb. "They are planning to kill you after the hearing. Make it look like an accident. The sheriff took $5,000 from Virgil Stone to make this happen. The judge, Judge Carver, he has been paid off too. The whole thing is rigged." "We know," Doc Wilson said. "The question is, what can we do about it?" "I can testify," Jack said firmly. "In court, under oath. I will tell them what I heard." Caleb studied the young man. "That will cost you your job. Maybe more. Brennan will come after you." "Let him try." Jack's voice shook slightly, but his eyes held steady. "I became a deputy to uphold the law, not to help corrupt men steal from honest ones. My father did not raise me to look away from wrong just because it is convenient." "Your father raised you right," Doc said quietly. They spent the next hour going over Jack's testimony, making sure every detail was clear, every fact straight. Then Doc left to find Clara Henderson, to convince her to testify as well. Jack returned to town, playing his role as loyal deputy for one more day. Caleb walked out to the porch after they left, staring across his land. Ayanna followed, moving carefully. They stood quietly, watching the sun climb higher, burning off the morning chill. "Tomorrow we might lose everything," Caleb said. "Yes. Does not seem fair, does it? We did nothing wrong. We just tried to survive, to build something. Fair is a word white men use when want to pretend world makes sense." Ayanna's voice held old bitterness. "My people learned long ago that fair does not exist. Only strong and weak. Only those who take and those who lose." Caleb looked at her. "You do not really believe that." "Why not?" "Because you risked your life to help me. That is not the action of someone who believes only in strength. That is the action of someone who believes in loyalty, in honor, in doing what is right even when it costs you." She had no answer for that. He was right, damn him. Somewhere in the past days she had started to believe again, in kindness, in trust, in the possibility that not all white men were enemies. "If we lose tomorrow," she said slowly, "where will you go?" "I have not thought that far ahead." "You should. You and Tommy. You will need a plan." "What about you?" She touched the turquoise necklace at her throat. "I will disappear, go where they cannot find me. It is what I am good at." "Or," Caleb said quietly, "we could all stay together. Or Shimon, my could go out together. Find new land. Start over." "Why would you want that? I am the reason you are in this trouble." "No, greed is the reason I am in this trouble. You are the reason I remembered how to care about something other than grief." He turned to face her fully. "These past days, having you and Tommy here, working together, eating together, it reminded me what a family feels like. I did not realize how much I missed that until it came back." Ayanna's throat tightened. "I am not your family. I am Apache. You are white. The world will not accept it. The world can go to hell." Despite everything, she smiled, small but real. "You are a strange man, Caleb Thornton." "I have been told." The moment stretched, fragile as spun glass. Then Tommy's voice shattered it. "Someone's coming! From the east!" They turned. A lone rider approached, moving fast. Not the measured pace of a deputy with bad news, but the urgent speed of someone with purpose. As the rider drew closer, Ayana's breath caught. The figure was small, young, dark-skinned, riding bareback on a paint pony, hair flying behind like a war banner. "It cannot be," she whispered. But it was. She knew that silhouette the way she knew her own heartbeat. Knew the way the rider sat a horse, the particular tilt of the head. She had thought him dead for 4 years, had mourned him, had carved his memory into her soul like canyon walls holding ancient pictographs. The rider pulled up short in the yard, the paint pony dancing. The boy slid down, 12 years old, but carrying the weight of far more, all sharp angles and fierce eyes. "Ayana," he said in Apache, his voice breaking with emotion. "Nahuel." Her voice cracked on his name. Her baby brother. Alive. She stumbled down the porch steps, ignoring the pain in her shoulder, and caught him as he ran her. They held each other, both crying now. 4 years of grief and loss pouring out in gasping sobs. Caleb and Tommy watched from the porch, giving them space, giving them this moment of impossible reunion. Finally, Ayana pulled back, studying Nahuel's face. He had grown, changed. The soft roundness of childhood had been carved away by hardship, leaving lean muscle and haunted shadows. But his eyes, those eyes were the same, still held that spark of defiance, of refusal to be broken. "How?" she managed in English for the other's benefit. "I thought you were dead." "I almost was," Nahuel replied in halting English, his accent thick. "The Rangers, they burn our village. I run, hide in the rocks. They think I am dead. I let them think it." "Where have you been?" "San Carlos Reservation. They catch me 3 moons after the attack. Put me there, I hate it. So I run away. Many times. They catch me, put me back. I run again." Pride flickered across his young face. "Last time they do not catch me. I search for you. Ask everyone. Finally, a woman in Dragoon Springs, she tell me she hear of Apache woman with Cowboy near Thunder Mesa. I come." Guyana pulled him close again, unable to believe he was real. "Solid here." Caleb descended the steps slowly. "He is welcome here, for as long as you both need." Nahuel studied Caleb with the wary assessment of someone who had learned not to trust easily. "You are the cowboy who saved my sister?" "I tried to help. She saved herself, mostly." "Good." Nahuel nodded approval. "Ayana is strong, like our mother." They went inside. Tommy, barely older than Nahuel himself, immediately adopted the role of host, offering food and water. The two boys eyed each other with mutual curiosity, sizing each other up the way young males do everywhere, across all cultures. "You hungry?" Tommy asked. "Always," Nahuel replied. "I can make you eggs and bacon." "You like bacon?" "Course you do. Everybody likes bacon." While Tommy cooked, Nahuel told his story in more detail. The years on the reservation, the cruelty, the hunger, the disease, how he had finally escaped 3 months ago, how he had survived by stealing, hiding, moving constantly, how the search for his sister had become the only thing that mattered. "I did not know if you were alive," he said to Ayana, "but I had to look, had to try." "I'm glad you did not give up," she said softly. That afternoon, they explained the situation to Nahuel. The hearing tomorrow, the conspiracy, the very real possibility that they would lose everything. Nahuel listened with the intense focus of someone far older than his years. When they finished, he spoke with surprising wisdom. "Among our people, when we face an enemy too strong to fight directly, we do not meet them head on. We use their strength against them, make them overconfident. Let them think they have won, then strike where they are weakest. We do not have time for elaborate strategy," Caleb said. "The hearing is tomorrow morning. Then we make them reveal themselves tomorrow, in court, in front of everyone." "How?" Doc Wilson had returned while they were talking, Clara Henderson in tow. The widow looked nervous but determined. Nahuel smiled, and it was not a child's smile. "Greedy men cannot help but brag. You make them feel safe. Make them think they have already won. Then you push them until they say the truth out loud." Caleb and Doc exchanged glances. The boy had a point. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Clara practiced her testimony with Doc. Jack Mercer returned after dark with news that the sheriff and Virgil Stone were indeed celebrating, already drunk on anticipated victory. Ayanna rested, saving her strength. Nawel and Tommy became fast friends, bonding over shared stories of survival and loss. That night, Caleb could not sleep. He stood on the porch, watching stars wheel overhead, thinking about tomorrow. About what he stood to lose, about what he had already gained. Ayanna found him there, wrapped in a blanket against the cold. "You should rest," she said. "So should you. My shoulder will not let me sleep." They stood side by side, comfortable in shared silence. Finally, Caleb spoke. "If this goes badly tomorrow, I want you to take Tommy and Nahuel and run. Get as far from here as you can. And you? I will deal with whatever comes." "That is stupid plan." Despite everything, he smiled. "You have a better one?" "Yes, we all survive. We all stay together. We become the family you spoke of." "That would be nice," he admitted, "but it might not be possible." "Then we make it possible." She turned to face him, her dark eyes catching starlight. "You saved my life. You gave my brother safety. You showed me that not all white men are monsters. I will not abandon you to face this alone." "Ayanna." "Yeah, no, listen. 4 years I have been running. 4 years alone. I am tired of running. I am tired of being alone. You said we fight this together. I'm holding you to that." He wanted to argue, wanted to protect her from what might come, but looking into her eyes, seeing the fierce determination there, he knew arguing would be useless. "Together then," he said, "together." She held out her hand. He took it. Her skin was warm, calloused from work, strong. They stood like that for a long moment, hands clasped, an unspoken promise passing between them. Morning came too fast. They dressed for court in the best clothes they had. Caleb in his old army dress uniform, carefully preserved despite years in a trunk. Ayanna in a dress Clara Henderson had brought, simple blue cotton that fit reasonably well. Tommy wore a shirt Caleb had given him, slightly too large but clean. Nahuel refused to change from his deerskin clothes, and no one pressed him. The ride to Sulphur Springs took 2 hours. None of them spoke much. There was nothing left to say. Everything would be decided in the next few hours. The courthouse was really just a large room above the land office, used for official business when needed. By the time they arrived, it was already packed. News had spread. Everyone wanted to see the Apache woman and the cowboy who defended her face judgment. Judge Carver sat behind a makeshift bench, a heavy man with jowls that shook when he talked. His eyes held the dull gleam of someone who had sold his integrity so many times he no longer remembered what it felt like to have principles. Sheriff Brennan stood to one side, trying to look official. Virgil Stone sat in the front row, perfectly groomed, radiating smug confidence. Through the window, barely visible on the ridge outside town, a lone rider sat motionless on his horse. Hunt McKenna, close enough to watch, far enough to run. Caleb's group took seats on the left side. Doc Wilson sat with them, as did Jack Mercer, still in his deputy uniform. Clara Henderson fidgeted in her seat, clearly terrified but present nonetheless. Judge Carver banged his gavel. "Court is now in session. We are here to address 2 matters. First, the land ownership dispute regarding the property known as Thunder Mesa. Second, charges of illegal detention of an Apache woman." "Your Honor," Virgil Stone's lawyer stood, a thin man with the predatory look of a vulture. "If it pleases the court, I would like to present evidence regarding the land dispute first." "Proceed." The lawyer presented the forged Elijah Moss deed with theatrical flair. "This document, dated March 3, 1876, clearly shows that my client's associate, Mr. Elijah Moss, purchased Thunder Mesa from the Territorial Land Office. Mr. Thornton's deed, dated 1878, is therefore invalid as the land was already owned." Caleb's hands clenched into fists under the table. Doc Wilson stood. "Your Honor, I have records showing no Elijah Moss ever lived in this county. The deed is a forgery." "Do you have proof of forgery?" Judge Carver asked, his tone making it clear he did not care about the answer. "I have absence of proof, no birth records, no marriage records, no—" "Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence." The judge's smile was oily. "The deed appears legitimate to me." Caleb felt the trap closing. They were going to lose. The whole thing was rigged, just as Ayanna had warned. Then Jack Mercer stood. "Your Honor, I have testimony to give." "Deputy Mercer, this is not the time." "It is exactly the time." Jack's voice shook but held firm. "2 nights ago, I overheard Sheriff Brennan, Virgil Stone, and a man named Hunt McKenna discussing this case. The sheriff admitted he had been paid $5,000 to ensure Mr. Thornton's deed was declared invalid. Virgil Stone admitted he had paid you, Judge Carver, to rule in his favor." The courtroom erupted. Judge Carver's face went purple. "You are out of order, Deputy." "And they discussed having Mr. Thornton killed after this hearing, made to look like an accident." "That is a lie." Sheriff Brennan lunged toward Jack, but Doc Wilson stepped between them. "Is it?" Doc's voice cut through the chaos. "Because I have a witness who heard the same conversation. A witness who was shot by Hunt McKenna for overhearing it." All eyes turned to Ayanna. She stood slowly, turned, and pulled down the shoulder of her dress just enough to show the bandage, the blood seeping through. She stood slowly, turned, and pulled down the shoulder of her dress just enough to show the bandage, the blood seeping through. "Hunt McKenna shoot me." She spoke slowly, pointing to her shoulder. "3 night ago, I on roof, I hear them talk. They plan kill Mr. Thornton. After court, make look like accident." She paused, searching for words. "Sheriff say he take money, $5,000. I hear all." Hunt stood in the back, his hand dropping to his gun. "She is lying. She is Apache. They all lie." "Then why did you shoot her?" Caleb was on his feet now, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had commanded soldiers in battle. "If she is lying, why try to kill her to keep her quiet?" Virgil Stone stood, trying to regain control. "Your Honor, this is absurd. The ravings of criminals, and I have proof." Jack pulled papers from his coat. Withdrawal records from the Sulphur Springs Bank. $5,000 taken from the railroad company account 2 weeks ago, deposited into Sheriff Brennan's personal account. The sheriff's face had gone from red to white. "I can explain that. And I have a telegram from the Tucson Land Office." Doc held up a paper. "Arrived this morning. States that no deed for Thunder Mesa was filed in 1876. The first deed on record is Caleb Thornton's, dated 1878. "That is impossible," Virgil shouted. "I had that deed authenticated by—" "By whom?" Caleb asked quietly. "By the same forger who created it?" The room went silent. Virgil Stone realized his mistake too late. He had just admitted the deed was created, not discovered. Judge Carver's gavel banged weakly. "This court is in recess while I—" "No." Clara Henderson stood, her voice surprising everyone with its strength. "No more recess. No more delays. I watched you people try to lynch an innocent woman. I watched you forge documents and bribe officials. I will not stay silent anymore." Other voices joined hers. Townspeople who had watched in silence, troubled by what they saw but afraid to speak. Now, with others speaking first, they found their courage. The tide had turned. Hunt McKenna saw it happening, saw his payday evaporating. His hand went for his gun. "Do not." Caleb's voice cracked like a whip. He had not drawn his peacemaker, but his hand rested on it, and something in his eyes made Hunt freeze. "You are good, I can see that, professional. But I fought in a war where professional soldiers died by the thousands. I survived Shiloh. I survived Atlanta. I will survive you." Hunt's hand moved away from his gun slowly. "I was just doing a job. Find a better job." Sheriff Brennan tried to run. Jack Mercer caught him at the door. "You are under arrest, Lucas, for conspiracy, bribery, and attempted murder." Judge Carver sat frozen, his corruption laid bare for all to see. Doc Wilson approached the bench. "I believe you should recuse yourself from this case, Judge, given your obvious conflict of interest." The judge looked around at the hostile faces, at the angry crowd, at his ruined career. He stood without a word and walked out, leaving his gavel behind. In the chaos that followed, a new judge was hastily summoned from the neighboring county. A real judge, known for fairness. He reviewed the evidence in under an hour. "The Moss deed is clearly fraudulent," he declared. "Caleb Thornton's ownership of Thunder Mesa is legitimate and shall not be challenged. Furthermore, all charges against Mr. Thornton regarding the Apache woman are dismissed. The indentured servitude contract, while unusual, was entered into voluntarily and is legal. He banged the gavel. This court is adjourned. Caleb felt the weight lift from his shoulders all at once. They had won. Through the window, he caught a glimpse of the lone rider turning his horse away from town, disappearing into the desert. Hunt McKenna denied his pay, but not his pride. Caleb knew they had not seen the last of him. Against all odds, through courage and truth, they had won. Ayanna touched his arm. We did it. We did. Outside the courthouse, townspeople approached to apologize, to shake Caleb's hand, to welcome Ayanna. Not all of them. Some still glared with hatred and distrust. But enough. Enough to matter. That night should have been peaceful. Should have been celebration. But Caleb knew better. Men like Virgil Stone did not accept defeat gracefully. And Hunt McKenna was still out there, unpaid but still dangerous. They rode back to Thunder Mesa as the sun set, alert for trouble. It came just as they reached the ranch. Smoke, billowing black against the evening sky. The barn was on fire. Caleb kicked Sterling into a gallop. They reached the yard to find flames consuming the barn, the terrified cattle breaking through fences, scattering. And standing in the yard, rifle in hand, Hunt McKenna waited. No pay? Hunt called out. No reason to keep you alive. He raised the rifle. Caleb drew his peacemaker, but Hunt was faster, already aimed, already squeezing the trigger. An arrow took him in the shoulder before he could fire. Hunt spun, shocked, to see Nahuel standing 50 feet away, bow drawn for another shot. The boy had been practicing in secret, keeping alive the skills his father had taught him. You leave my family alone, Nahuel said in Apache, then again in English. Hunt dropped the rifle, clutching his shoulder. But he was not finished. He pulled a knife with his good hand, charging toward the boy. Ayanna stepped between them despite her wounded shoulder. She had no weapon, but she had lived 4 years by her wits and her courage. She did not flinch. Hunt's knife came up. Caleb's shot rang out, precise and clean. The bullet hit Hunt's knife hand, sending the weapon spinning away. Hunt dropped to his knees, both arms wounded now, beaten. It is over, Caleb said, walking closer, peacemaker, still aimed. You have lost. Tommy and Nahuel were already organizing a bucket brigade for the barn. The fire had not spread far, only one section burned, salvageable. By the time Deputy Jack Mercer arrived with reinforcements, Hunt McKenna was tied up, the fire was out, and the cattle were being rounded back up. You folks cannot stay out of trouble, can you? Jack said, but he was smiling. Trouble seems to find us, Caleb replied. Hunt was taken away to stand trial for attempted murder, arson, and a dozen other charges. Virgil Stone and Sheriff Brennan faced federal conspiracy charges. Judge Carver resigned in disgrace. The story spread across the territory. The cowboy who stood up to corruption, the Apache woman who risked everything for justice, the 2 boys who helped save the day. It became legend, embellished with each retelling. But that night, after everyone had left, after the last embers of the barn fire had been stamped out, the 4 of them sat on the porch in exhausted silence. What happens now? Tommy asked. We rebuild, Caleb said. We fix the barn. We repair the fences. We live. Together? Ayanna asked quietly. If you want. She looked at Nahuel, who nodded eagerly. Looked at Tommy, who grinned hopefully. Looked at Caleb, whose blue eyes held a question and an offer and a promise all at once. Together, she said. 3 months passed. Spring came to Thunder Mesa with wildflowers and new grass. The barn stood rebuilt, bigger than before, painted bright red. The cattle herd had grown to 100 head. The horses, including the black stallion Ayanna had named Midnight, ran strong and healthy. Nahuel and Tommy had become inseparable, teaching each other their different skills. Tommy learned to track and hunt. Nahuel learned to read and write English. They were brothers in all but blood. The legal matters were resolved. Caleb's ownership of Thunder Mesa was confirmed permanently. Ayanna's indentured contract was officially voided, declared invalid due to being created under duress. She was free to leave, free to go anywhere. She chose to stay. On a warm April morning, Doc Wilson rode out to Thunder Mesa. He found them all working together. Caleb and Tommy repairing the windmill, Ayanna and Nahuel training a new Mustang, a family in all but name. Got something for you, Doc said, pulling a paper from his bag. Caleb took it, read it, his eyes widening. This is a marriage license. Blank. Thought you might want it. No pressure, mine. But if you and Ayana were thinking about making things official, I can perform the ceremony. I am licensed by the territory. Caleb looked toward where Ayana worked with the Mustang, her movements graceful and sure, her laughter at something Nahuel said carrying across the yard. I should ask her first, he said, probably wise. That evening after supper, Caleb asked Ayana to walk with him. They climbed to the top of the mesa that gave the ranch its name, looking out over the land that rolled away to distant mountains. I have something to ask you, Caleb said. I know, I heard Doc Wilson this morning. You did? I have very good ears. She smiled. You are not subtle, Caleb Thornton. Never claimed to be. He took her hand. These past months, having you here, working beside you, watching you with Nahuel and Tommy, it made me realize something. I do not want this to end. I do not want you to ever feel like you have to leave. I do not want to leave. Then stay, not as hired help, not as someone paying a debt. Stay as my wife, as my partner, as the person I want to build a life with. Ayana took her time before answering. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. My people have a saying, home is not where you are born. Home is where you choose to stay. I choose this. I choose you. I choose us. Is that a yes? That is a yes. 3 weeks later, on a spring morning when wildflowers painted the mesa in colors Ayana had thought she would never see again, they gathered under open sky. Doc Wilson stood before them, his weathered face soft with emotion. Clara Henderson wept openly, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Jack Mercer, wearing his new sheriff's badge with pride, stood straight as a soldier. Tommy and Nahuel flanked the couple, scrubbed clean and grinning so wide their faces hurt. The ceremony took place on Thunder Mesa itself. The land spread below them in all directions. Caleb had asked Ayana where she wanted to marry, expecting her to choose the house or the barn. She had pointed to the mesa top without hesitation. Where earth meets sky, where my people marry, where promises are witnessed by something bigger than men. She wore her grandmother's turquoise necklace over a simple white dress Clara had sewn, each stitch a prayer for happiness. Her hair fell loose in the Apache tradition, adorned with small white flowers Nahuel had gathered at dawn. She had never looked more beautiful. She had never looked more herself. Caleb wore his best suit, the one from his first wedding. He had hesitated, unsure if it honored Margaret's memory or betrayed it. But Tommy had found him standing in front of the mirror, paralyzed by doubt. She'd want you happy, sir, the boy had said quietly. She'd want you to live. And so he wore it, a bridge between the man he had been and the man he was becoming. Doc opened his worn Bible, then closed it again. I could read you words written by men who never knew this land, never knew what it means to choose love over hate, to choose courage over fear. But I think we need different words today. He looked at Caleb. Repeat after me. I, Caleb Thornton. Caleb's voice was steady, though his hands trembled. I, Caleb Thornton, take you, Ayana, as my wife. I promise to see you as you are, not as the world demands you be. I promise to stand with you, to fight beside you, to build with you a home where love matters more than law, where family is made by choice, not blood. I promise this until my last breath, and if there is anything beyond, I promise it there too. Ayana's turn. She spoke first in Apache, the old words, the promises her mother had spoken, her grandmother before her, the words for joining two lives into one path. Then, in careful, slow English, she translated, I, Ayana, take you, Caleb. I promise to walk beside you, to make home with you, not because I must, but because I choose. You saved me from cage, but more, you save me from believing all men are enemies. You give me back hope. You give me back my brother. You give me family. I promise you my strength, my loyalty, my heart, all of it, until the end. Her grammar stumbled, but her meaning shone clear as desert sun. Tommy sniffled loudly. Nahuel elbowed him, grinning. Doc's voice thickened with emotion. Then by the power vested in me by this territory, and more importantly, by the love I witness here, I pronounce you husband and wife. He smiled. Caleb, you may kiss your bride. Caleb's hand cupped her face, gentle, asking permission even now. Ayanna rose on her toes and their lips met as the wind carried the scent of sage and new grass across the mesa. Tommy whooped. Nahuel let out a war cry that echoed off the distant mountains. Even Clara laughed through her tears. And on Thunder Mesa, under the endless Arizona sky, two people who should never have met, who should never have survived, who should never have been allowed to love, promised themselves to each other before earth and sky and the family they had chosen. That night, as stars filled the sky and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage across Thunder Mesa, the four of them sat on the porch. A family forged not by blood, but by choice, by courage, by the decision to stand together against a world that said they should not exist. "Tell us a story," Tommy asked Nahuel. "What kind of story?" "A good one, with adventure." Nahuel grinned. "I know one, Jean, about a warrior who fell in love with a spirit woman and how their love changed the world." As the boy began to speak, his voice rising and falling with the rhythm of ancient storytelling, Caleb and Ayanna sat close together, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. They had survived the cage and the conspiracy, had defeated greed and corruption, had found family in the most unexpected places. But more than that, they had found home, not in the land itself, though the land was beautiful, not in the house, though the house was strong. They had found home in each other, in the quiet moments and the loud ones, in the work shared and the meals eaten together, in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it as one. Nahuel's story wound through the darkness, weaving magic and hope into the night air. Tommy listened with rapt attention. Caleb closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of his wife beside him, the sound of the boys' voices, the solid weight of home. He had lost everything once: wife, child, hope. But life, he had learned, was not a single story. It was chapters, some ending in tragedy, some beginning in unexpected grace. This chapter, the one that started in a cage in Sulphur Springs and led to this moment, to this family, to this peace, this was the one he would remember when his time came. This was the one that made all the pain before it worthwhile. "Are you happy?" Ayanna whispered, quiet enough that only he could hear. "More than I thought possible." "Good." She squeezed his hand. "Me too." The story continued. The stars wheeled overhead. The desert breathed around them, ancient and patient and eternal. And on Thunder Mesa, in a home built from loss and courage and unexpected love, four souls who had been broken found wholeness together. The last promise had been kept, not the promise of the indentured contract, long since voided and forgotten, but the deeper promise, the one Caleb had made to himself when he cut Ayanna free from that cage, to do better, to be better, to save someone when it mattered. He had saved her. She had saved him. They had saved each other. And in doing so, they had created something that would endure long after they were gone. A family, a home, a legacy of choosing love over hate, courage over fear, together over alone. The story ended. Tommy yawned. Nahuel stretched. The night grew late. "Bedtime," Ayanna said, and the boys groaned but obeyed, heading inside with the easy obedience of children who know they are loved. Caleb and Ayanna remained on the porch a moment longer, watching the moon rise over the Dragoon Mountains, casting silver light across their land, their home, their future. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me. Not an Apache, not a savage, not a problem to be solved. Just me. Thank you for staying, for choosing this, for choosing us." They sat in comfortable silence as the night deepened, two people who had found against all odds what every soul searches for: a place to belong, a reason to fight, a home worth keeping. The wind carried their story across the desert, whispered it to the mountains, wove it into the fabric of the land itself. And Thunder Mesa remembered, would always remember, the cowboy and the Apache woman, the two boys, the family that should not have been but was. The last promise kept the end.